If I could have, I think I would have awarded Ashley a halo for patience for the way that he managed to deal with repeated questions day after day without losing his equanimity.
Lovely guy, engaging, thoughtful, well-informed. You know, Ashley knows his stuff really deeply. I can't think of anybody else in New Zealand who knows public health as well as he does.
I met Ashley on the first day of our Masters in Public Health postgraduate program. I think anyone in public health is usually a bit of an idealist. He was savvy, politically astute, and clearly cut out to be a leader.
And he's a very good actor, talented, believable, enjoyable, with a spark. Most of the plays that he was in, and he took the you might say the juvenile lead, usually with a romantic partner. I'm not at all surprised these days that he's become a bit of a heartthrob as a result of the COVID exposure.
I was getting some fresh air one day and I saw someone sitting on a park bench who had a tattoo of Ashley Bloomfield on their calf muscle, quite large and quite striking, but also quite accurate. I remember thinking, you know, you have reached a very special place in the Kiwi psyche when people are permanently applying you in ink to your leg. But that's what Ashley had done, just by being himself, by being so clear and so calm and so reassuring, so factual, exactly when New Zealand needed it.
Well, it was just luck of the draw that you came out last. But how was your pandemic year?
Where do you want me to start?
No, look, I know you've been asked this many times in different ways, but you know, in your wildest dreams or imaginings, or even in your professional planning, did you imagine one day you might be fronting a national response to a global pandemic?
I hadn't put that in my career planning, I dare say, and there were many nights, especially early on, where I woke up thinking, I've only got a 5-year contract and this is a 1 in 100 year pandemic. You know, what did I do wrong here?
Seriously though, were there sleepless nights on those early days?
There were certainly. I talk about waking up at 3 in the morning, night after night, in a cold sweat, literally dreaming COVID-19. And it was just the uncertainty and the hugeness of it all, and that huge leadership challenge of very little or limited information, but huge decisions to advise on. And interestingly, I was reading some months back a newspaper piece. Brad Hazard, who's the Minister of Health in New South Wales, a very experienced long-term career politician who very rarely gives interviews, but he described exactly that same feeling, that anxiety of the first few weeks and just seeing this thing unfold, and huge decisions to be made. And you know, both Australia and New Zealand, I think, were countries that acted so quickly and courageously early on, and it's served us well.
A lot of people have said that, you know, the times throw up the man, and it's really kind of fortunate that you were in the job at the time. You have that public health background. What drew you to public health as opposed to another medical discipline in the first place?
Well, a little bit by a process of elimination. I enjoyed my clinical work, I really did. I loved my time doing surgery, and I did some general practice. I really enjoyed that. But I had a close friend, one of my best friends through medical school, Andrew Wong, who went into public health, and he sort of tipped me off about it and said, I think this might be something you'd really enjoy. So I thought, okay. And actually at the time I was working for a well-known surgeon here at Wellington Hospital, Jim Shaw, and I was a house surgeon. Interestingly, his registrar at the time is now the chief medical officer working at the Ministry of Health, Andrew Connolly. We're both Tawa boys, I might add. But Jim joked about it with me, and he said, this will be easy, this interview for this training program. They'll take you down to Wellington. He said, you'll walk into the room and there'll be this black box, and they'll say, how do you do a hearing test? So that was his idea of public health, was, you'll become a hearing test doctor. So when I got back, actually he was very generous. He said, who was on the interview panel? And I went through and he said, I know them. Do you want me to give them a call? I wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad idea, but anyway, it was sort of a bit of a process of elimination, but I've never looked back.
Tell us a little bit about Ashley Bloomfield, medical student. What are your overriding memories of med school?
a great deal of fun. I had 2 years at Grafton Hall. First year, of course, down on the main campus, so we used to walk down every day as a group, walk back every day as a group. Occasionally, most days we'd stop by the pub for a beer on the way back. I loved my time, and then, of course, at the medical school itself. And in the second year, I was actually a social rep with Andrew Wong, who I mentioned earlier on, so we were responsible for toga parties, cocktail parties.
This is what I was getting at.
Yeah, general good fun on Friday nights at medical school. It wasn't me who turned the fire alarm on that night. But, medical school, and of course in those days the class size was only about 100 in each year, right. And so it was like a big family. And you also knew people in the years ahead and below, and so it was a very close-knit group, really.
Is this when the acting started?
Well, it did actually, because one of the things, and I just realised, of course, the Maidment Theatre has now been demolished, but I was certainly a keen participant in all the medical school reviews through medical school, and my first year it was in the Auckland Grammar Theatre, but after that we used to pack the Maidment out, I'd like to think, night after night.
If that picture of you wearing a crown gets out, it's all over. You know that, don't you? A lot of people in this room and in this country would probably say that you'd have made a very good GP. You've got a nice bedside manner, Yeah. Literally, just to happen that the whole nation's in bed.
Not at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I hope. Yeah.
It was, anyway. But what's been spread across the top of your medical career, of course, is leadership, and leadership of very complex bureaucracies. At what point did you think that, you might be interested in doing that and not just being a practitioner? And what have been the challenges of really taking those kind of roles on?
Yeah, so my wife Libby and I, we met at medical school, got married in our final year. We decided to shift to Wellington for 6 months at the end of my public health training, and we're still there. And quite early on in my time at the ministry, I was offered opportunities really to lead, and with that gift of being given that opportunity was also the challenges and the points in time where you feel that real imposter syndrome, and I certainly felt that last year as well. It's that sense of, oh goodness me, am I up for this? Can I do this? That sense of self-doubt, which is, as I've found out, quite normal. And actually, I like to talk about that now with young leaders especially, and talk about, yes, I get anxious, I get stressed, I feel self-doubt. And many of them feel very reassured by that, because they say, well, I really aspire to be a senior leader, but I didn't think I could because I doubt myself or I get anxious. And I said, welcome to the world of being a leader. So leadership's a real journey, and I guess last year was just another huge part of that journey, and an opportunity to learn a lot about yourself and also a lot about leadership, and I've been enjoying sharing some of those learnings over the last year too.
You worked for a year at the WHO in Geneva, and I've heard you, well, I recall you joking about the kind of bureaucracy you discovered there would make our Ministry of Health look pretty good. Speaking of leadership, I mean, what did you learn from the World Health Organization and the scale of that?
Well, I learned a couple of things. First of all, I learnt how fortunate I am to work and to live and work in New Zealand, and particularly as part of the New Zealand Public Service. This is one of the things, a big lesson for me working at the WHO was, and looking at health systems in countries around the world, is public services, including health services, rely on really strong governance and on strong public services, and also a non-corrupt public service. And this is something that I had completely taken for granted till I went and worked, not so much in the WHO, because it's a very good, strong public service as well, albeit a larger and somewhat more lumbering one. But you certainly look around the globe and you see that, and it made me realise the lack of corruption and that deep sense of service and commitment in this public service we have in New Zealand is just something we can't take for granted. And New Zealanders have seen it over the last year. I think that's one of the things that's given me most pleasure, is New Zealanders have seen the public service at its best, that it is deeply committed, it is agile, and it's work that's neither usually noticed or known about, and it's been visible, not just the work of the Ministry of Health, but right across the public service. So that was a huge lesson for me.
Not that I want to, rush on to the next global pandemic, but have we, not just New Zealand, but I mean, you were talking about how certain bureaucracies aren't up to it, and the WHO obviously is trying to run bureaucracy on a global scale. Are you relatively hopeful, slightly hopeful, that if this happened again, we might be better at it?
Well, I'll put my cards on the table. I'm pathologically optimistic,
Okay.
but I have great hope, and we must have hope here. The WHO is a fantastic institution, and whilst it can be very frustrating working there, or even if you're one of the member states and attending some of the big global governance meetings they have, its success relies on the support and the funding that it has from member states. And I think the pandemic has been a huge wake-up call, and we've seen a number of reports done, one co-chaired by Helen Clark, that has pointed out that actually it's not, if WHO has been unable to do its work as effectively as it needs to, then it is up to member states, including Aotearoa New Zealand, to step up and actually enable it to do so, to fund it properly, to govern it properly, to enable it properly. And that, I hope, is what will come out of this pandemic.
Hope.
Great. I'm very full of hope.
You're an optimist and you're a hopeful person. I wanted to ask you about being raised in the church, and still going to church, I believe. When I watched the 1 o'clock press conferences, at one point it struck me, you have a church background, and so does Jacinda Ardern. She's raised in different religions, but there was some sense of purpose or service or commitment to community that was coming through. Now, I don't want to speak for you, but where do you put that side of your life?
Yeah, so you're right. I certainly grew up. I've got a fairly eclectic background in the church. I grew up in the Baptist church. I went to a Presbyterian school, and we're now involved in the local Anglican church, although I should say I'm a fairly intermittent attender. My wife is a much more regular and committed attender than I am. So saying, I think the church had a deep impact on the values that have underpinned my life and my work, and I hopefully that goes beyond, well, it does go beyond my work. But certainly last year, one of the things that became really apparent to me was when you're in a situation like a global pandemic, where there's not much you can control about your context, it's the thing you can always control is how you respond, how you behave, how you come across. And of course, our behaviours are rooted in our values. So I've been reflecting a lot on what are those values that really underpin, the way that I've tried to lead myself and the organisation and the context over the last year. And the three ones that are really key for me have been kindness. So again, fully paid up member of the Kindness Club. I'll put that on the table. You don't need a pandemic to be kind to each other, please. Kindness actually underpins all the world's great religions. It's about hospitality and generosity to others without any expectation of reciprocity. And one of the things I've had to get used to over the last year is walking down the street and, well, first of all, people recognising me, but sometimes people wearing T-shirts with my face on them.
I was going to ask you about this.
On one of the versions of those T-shirts, it says underneath, "The Curve Crusher." And as I like to say, actually, I didn't crush the curve. We crushed the curve with our collective kindness. The call to action that was extended by the Prime Minister was, stay home, save lives, be kind. It's a very different message from stay home and look after yourselves. It was an invitation for us to act in each other's interests, and by goodness, we showed last year that we could, that it was important to us, and look what happened when we did. And my great hope again is that we can extend that to those other great challenges that we all, I think, aspire to do better on as a nation. Child poverty, homelessness, environmental sustainability, and indeed global warming. We must play a role in leading that.
So finally, you're back at Auckland University, where it all started. You've had a big year. How's this feel?
Well, it's humbling, actually. It feels, it's a real honour to be receiving this award, and I guess I had achieved one of my career goals, which had only recently become a career goal, which was to spend time as the Director General of Health. It's a wonderful privilege to be a senior public servant and indeed to be involved in helping lead what I genuinely believe is a great healthcare system. And I've worked at WHO, so I've had a chance to compare it to others. So this is really just quite unexpected, and it's a wonderful privilege. And it has reminded me once again of the time I spent here, not just my undergraduate degrees, but then doing the Masters in Public Health. And you saw Chris Bullen up there, and he's right, we met on our first day of doing our Masters in Public Health, and he was an amazing colleague. And again, I was privileged to do my Masters with people who were intelligent and thoughtful, and I had lecturers who were the same, and it really did set me up for a career in public health and in the public service, and I've just loved that opportunity.
Well, I guess I probably speak for many when I say we hope you stick around a little bit longer. Congratulations, Ashley Bloomfield.
Thank you.